Hello everyone. Creating test sets is one of the most critical parts in building reliable LLM-powered applications. Without test sets, it's very hard to evaluate the application, to find edge cases and improve the application for these, or to discover regressions when they appear. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use your production data to create test sets in Agenta. Agenta is an open source LLM ops platform that allows you to build reliable LLM application, provides you with a prompt management, a playground, evaluations, and observability. Before jumping into the demo, I would like to discuss a bit what are test sets and how are they used. You can jump directly to the demo if you wish. So to start, what is a test set and what is its structure? So a test set, simply said, is a set of test cases, each of which would have inputs, which are kind of the input that would map to the LLM application, ground truth, optionally, which is the expected answer of that LLM application, and possibly annotations. These could be annotations about how we expect it to be, or some metadata about each of the test case. Now, starting with the inputs of the test sets should be the column that your LLM application expects. For example, if you're building, let's say, a documentation chatbot where the user has a query and the chatbot answers it, the test set in this case would be for each row the query of the user. Now, this would be the case if you're building an end-to-end evaluation. So really evaluating the whole system end-to-end. But you could also have a test set that is for the prompt. Very likely, if you're building such a system, you're using RAG, where you have a prompt that takes the user query, but also some context that has been retrieved in the step before. And in this case, the test set would include the user query, but also the context. And in this case, what we would be using this test set to is to evaluate this component of the system, the prompt, or to kind of iterate on it in the playground. So one thing to always consider when you're building a test set is to which component of your system are you building it? Are you building a test set for the end-to-end system or for parts of the component? Now, as you see here, the inputs are always required. I mean, without inputs, we cannot invoke the system, the LLM application, or the component within the LLM application. Just while having the input, we can already evaluate the LLM application. We can do it using human evaluation, human feedback, that is running this test set and having a person look at the results, give the thumbs up, thumbs down, or any type of human evaluation. But also we can use it by evaluating it using an LLM as a judge, where we have a prompt that looks at the inputs, look at the result of the invocation of the LLM application, and basically score it accordingly. For example, if we are scoring the prompt in our last case that took the user query and the context, we can already score it on whether it's hallucinating or at least using that context in the response. We could create a prompt that takes the input, that takes the context, that takes the response, and assess the result on whether that context has been used in the response or not. Now, optionally, we could have also a ground truth. The ground truth is the expected answer from the system or the component we are evaluating. Having a ground truth opens a lot of possibility in evaluation, because now we can compare the prediction or the output of the LLM application or the component to this expected answer. And depending on the task we are solving, whether it's a classification or whether it's kind of unstructured, where, for example, having a chatbot answer a documentation, we would be using a different evaluator. Like in the former case, we would be using an exact match, while in the later case, we would be using something like semantic similarity or an LLM as a judge that compares these two responses. Finally, we could have annotations. Annotations are a bit similar to the ground truth, but they are just information about the answer or the case. Annotation could be used for evaluation. For example, the annotation could have some rule set about what should the answer have or not have. For example, let's say we have in our example of a chatbot, we could have an annotation that says for this question, for this input, the answer should mention Kubernetes. And then we could use this annotation for our LLM as a judge, where instead of kind of creating a prompt that compares the ground truth to the expected, to the predicted answer, we could create an LLM as a judge or a prompt that checks whether the rules that we have added in the annotation basically are compliant, or the LLM output is compliant to these. With that being said, let's look into how to create test sets in Agenta. There are multiple ways to do this. We can obviously upload a CSV or a JSON, but what I'm going to talk about today is creating test sets from production data, like from how your users are interacting with your application, or creating it from the playground. I have already created some trace data based on the example we have discussed, a chatbot that answers questions about our documentation. Let's look at one of the traces. You can see here the inputs, which is the user query and the context, and the output of the LLM application. Let's say I want to add this trace to a test set. I have to click here, add to test set. First, I need to select the test set. I'm going to create a new one and call it docs test set. And the second thing is I have to map the data within this trace to the columns in the test set. I can see here that the default mapping is already good. The query is mapped to the query column, the context to the context, and the outputs are mapped to the correct answer. But let's say I want to change that. I want to change the correct answer because I don't agree with that. I simply go here and I edit the answer. Let's say the right answer is, I don't know. I save it. I can take a look here on how it would look like in our test set. I save it, and now it's added. So let's say I want to batch add traces to my test set and not go one by one. For example, here we see that the chatbot is answering many times, I don't have enough information, I don't have enough information. Let's try to search these and to add them to a test set. I'm going to write down here, I don't have enough information. I'm going to select all these traces, click on add to test set. Now I have the same option. I can create a new one, or in this case, I'm going to use the same test set I have. I can check each of these traces, see how it would map to the columns, and even make sure that the data from the test set basically fits what I'm going to add here. I think it looks fine. I'm going to save it. Now, if I go to test sets and check my documentation, I can find all the data I have added. Now we have seen how to create test sets from production data, but we can also do it from the playground. Let me show you how. So let's say I'm working on this prompt for the documentation, and I find an interesting case where the answer of the LLM application is not what I think, or is actually a good edge case to test for. I can click here, click on Add to Test Set, and I have the same drawer that allows me to select the test set, check the mapping, and add it to my test set. So one final thing. Now that I have a test set, what can I do with it? Well, first thing, I can load it in the playground. I can select the test set, select which test cases I want to use, load these, and iterate on the playground on my prompt on these. I can also create evaluations and run them on these test sets. But that I'm going to show in a different video. Thanks a lot for listening. I hope this was useful. If it was, please subscribe to this channel, join our Slack, and check out Agenta. Have a great day.